So welcome everyone to the Edmonds Citizen Housing Commission webinar. My name is Jasmine and I will be your facilitator for this evening. So here's a brief overview of our agenda tonight. We'll start the presentation with an overview of the commission, move into a recorded presentation of policy recommendations, and then finally we'll move into the Q&A portion of our event. There are a few ways that you can leave feedback this evening, and we will go over those shortly. So before we get started, I am going to pass it over to Commissioner Gladstone for our land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes, who since time immemorial have hunted, fished, gathered, and taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Okay, so for tonight's event, we'll be compiling all the feedback that we received tonight for the Commission's consideration. If you have additional feedback to share after this webinar, please feel free to email us at housing.pub.comments@edmondswa.gov. Now we'll go into a brief overview about the Commission. So the Edmonds Citizens Housing Commission was established via City Council Resolution 1427 to develop for council consideration diverse housing policy options designed to expand the range of housing, including rental and owned, available in Edmonds, irrespective of age, gender, race, religious affiliation, physical disability, or sexual orientation. The commission is made up of Edmonds residents across the city, reflecting different backgrounds and perspectives. For the appointment process, the city was divided into 7 districts based on U.S. Census areas. Each council member was assigned a district and appointed 2 commissioners and 1 alternate. The mayor appointed 1 at-large commissioner and 1 alternate. So we'll be using a platform called Mural for tonight's event to answer questions. Alyssa, if you can go ahead and drop the link to our Mural board in the chat, that would be great. So if you all want to click on the link in the chat once Alyssa drops it in there, and follow these instructions to leave your questions. So the first is to sign in as a guest using your name. You can adjust your Zoom settings as needed on the bottom right of your screen, so that you can see both the presentation and be able to leave questions in Mural. And to actually leave your question, you will double click anywhere on the whiteboard to add a sticky note, and you can type directly into that sticky note. If you're having any trouble using Mural as we're kind of going through this event, you can feel free to leave your questions in the chat box on Zoom, or feel free to reach us in the chat box on Zoom to help you with tech support. And with that, we'll be moving into our policy recommendations. So tonight we've recorded 11 of the 19 policy recommendations, and they're listed on your screen here. The numbers in the table provided in this slide correspond to the numbers in the table provided in your meeting packet. Please, if you can use these numbers in your questions to help us differentiate which policy you're referring to when you're asking your questions. So we have 4 commissioners who have recorded presentations for tonight's event. We have Commissioner Hayes-Herrick from Zone 1, Commissioner Gladstone from Zone 7, Commissioner Chen from Zone 7, and Commissioner Thronston, who is our at-large commissioner. I am going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second just to pull up the video of the presentation recordings, and then we'll play that. Okay.
This policy, proposed policy, incentives for missing middle home ownership, is to develop incentives that apply to missing middle housing types citywide that allow home ownership for those at or below average median family income. So missing middle housing is a term that is being used commonly now to relate to a building that's house scale, but it has more than one unit in it. And it's a type of housing actually that existed before the whole notion of single family housing was even created, or in the early 1900s. And it was you could see them a lot where you would have duplexes, where there's two homes that could be each owned separately, or triplexes, three owned separately, or even fourplexes. And they're called missing middle because they haven't been built in recent times, particularly after they started the single family housing zoning that in and of itself was designed to keep different populations out of neighborhoods. So this is the kind of housing that we would be looking to bring back in ways that allow for middle income families or households to be able to buy into the market. The committee that developed this policy was very interested in providing a means by which Edmonds would be able to demonstrate some equity around housing. And this really stems back to the historic racially exclusionary zoning practices. Some people may have heard of redlining, which barred people of color from buying homes in different neighborhoods. And there were discriminatory loan practices as well that would limit financing opportunities, particularly for people of color, making it very difficult to buy and own homes all across the country, but also in Edmonds. And home ownership is one of the main ways that families are able to build intergenerational wealth. And so it has a lasting impact, where centuries of these racially discriminatory practices have contributed to a gap in wealth and home ownership between white people and people of color. And one of the tools for addressing the past inequities is to provide pathways for home ownership. And through expanding attainable smaller housing options is one of those tools. And so by allowing for incentives in some fashion to allow for this type of housing, the goal of the policy is that it will help to remedy these past inequities and bring forward some more attainable types of smaller homes that can allow for those who may not have been able to own a home in the past could in the future. And this helps not only solve the inequities of the past, but it also, or to address the inequities of the past, it also helps all of the residents of Edmonds. This proposed policy is also intended to address racial equity issues that have existed historically. And the policy is to encourage racial equity housing options by developing design requirements and zoning changes that allow for home ownership of two attached single-family homes, meaning duplex or two-unit households or townhouses, in lieu of one large house in single-family residential areas citywide. So here in Edmonds, we have I'd say a large portion of the area of the city is single-family residential zones that can have only one house on it, including an accessory dwelling unit. The house can be of any size, as long as it fits the lot requirements and height limits for that zone. Duplexes are not allowed in the single-family residential areas. So what you could end up with is one single-family home being 4,000 square feet that serves one higher income household, when you have the possibility of taking that same 4,000 square foot structure and having two separate units that are affordable for a lower income bracket household. And so with the kinds of design standards and zoning requirements and all that, the idea would be that we would open up possibilities for more affordable housing that doesn't necessarily change the character of the single family residential areas, because the buildings themselves would be no larger than what would be put with a single family residential house.
Medium density single family housing. This policy establishes a new zoning type of single family housing that allows for construction of zero lot line duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes of only 1 or 2 story height, located in specific Edmonds areas that are 1, contiguous to or along high volume transit routes, or sited next to a neighborhood business zoning district, or 3, close to schools or medical complexes. This policy acknowledges the value of single-family housing in Edmonds and recognizes a lack of attainable single-family housing options across the city. By providing these additional single-family housing types, the policy aims to increase housing opportunities for a more diverse group of individuals and families within the community, while also preserving the existing neighborhood characteristics.
Hello, Happy New Year. As we welcome 2021 with hope, compassion, and determination, I want to wish you and your family a happy, healthy, prosperous New Year. My name is Will Chen. I'm one of the commissioners from Zone 7. Today, I want to take this opportunity to talk to you a couple of housing policy proposals. The first one is the accessory dwelling unit. These policies has some background information. Our city of Edmonds, currently allow each house to have an accessory dwelling, a smaller additional living unit on a residential lot if it's attached to the main house. Some other cities surrounding our cities allow accessory dwelling units that is attached, also known as backyard cottage or mother-in-law unit, instead of the attached units. Whether it's attached or detached, the accessory dwelling unit must meet community standards for size, lot placement, ownerships, and parking requirements. How does this policy related to our commission's mission? Again, the Housing Commission's mission is to develop for council considerations diverse housing policy options designed to expand the range of housing, including rental and own, available in Edmonds, irrespective of age, gender, race, religious affiliation, physical disability, or sexual orientations. Now let's look at this policy. Some of the potential problems that we can solve is our desperately needed aging in place. You know, Edmonds, we have sizable senior citizens living in these cities that they love. They don't want to move away from their house, but the property tax is rising as the property value is rising over time. And for those people who have fixed incomes, this is becoming a problem. So this accessory dwelling unit, especially the detached dwelling unit, is going to provide an option for people who can stay in their main house and have their family live in one of the units. Another positive outcomes that can come out of this is it will strengthen a family bond by providing these additional units, these dwelling units for the family member can stay there and take care of each other, so that the seniors can remain in their home. So this is a viable options for us to consider. Some of the concerns that might come out of this is the higher density and potentially the parking issue. There are some concerns that the dwelling unit is going to block the view of the surrounding house. That's why we need to come up with a definitive requirements to make this option viable. So let me read out these policy prescriptions. It's allow either one attached or detached accessory dwelling unit on the property in a single-family residential area with clear and definitive development requirements such as size, ownership, and parking requirements under the standard permitting process and not require a conditional use permit. So that's it for this detached accessory dwelling unit policy. Have a good day.
Cluster cottage housing. Cluster and cottage housing is a flexible approach to land development. In this type of housing, multiple smaller scale single-family homes or cottages are clustered together on variable size lots. The purpose of doing that is to maximize open space, to create common areas, to provide for flow, to ensure a safe place for play for children in the area, and also to encourage the development of trails and walkways throughout the cluster development. Can also limit traffic flow by having parking at the front part of the cottage area. Currently in Edmonds, cluster and cottage housing can only be developed through the zoning process called a planned residential development. This is typically used for developing larger planned communities. Developing a single-family zoning type specifically for cottage housing would allow developers a more direct permitting process and eliminate the more costly PRD process to developing cluster housing. The advantage to this would be hopefully that would delete some of the cost in building these homes and therefore lower the cost. Additionally, as we were considering this policy idea, we thought that it would be a good idea that had something specific for those people who needed one-level story housing, such as the elderly or those individuals with mobility issues that prefer not to have to navigate stairs in their home. We also thought it would be a good way to create housing close to the hospital and other healthcare providers that made it more manageable for residents of those cottage areas, those cottage communities, to be able to access their healthcare. Development of neighborhood villages. Neighborhood villages are locally oriented, mixed-use commercial and residential districts with access to major transit. The residential units in a neighborhood village may include live-work spaces, cluster housing, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, and also multifamily apartment buildings with ground floor commercial use. The ground floor commercial space may include businesses like coffee shops, specialty supermarkets, boutique shops, and small restaurants. Possible areas in Edmonds for consideration of neighborhood villages are those existing small commercial hubs currently zoned as business neighborhood. Any change to allow a neighborhood village would require a full public process and consideration of environmental impacts. This policy aims to create community and social gathering points by rethinking areas zoned neighborhood business or business neighborhood, meaning the Five Corners, Perrinville areas that already exist as commercial hubs. These areas and the surrounding properties are prime locations to transform into neighborhood villages. This policy highlights areas in Edmonds where missing middle, artist, and low-income housing would ideally fit and close to transit lines and existing businesses to create a vibrant community. It would also create a walkable area that could help build that sense of community and provide unique neighborhoods within the Edmonds community.
One of the policies we've been taking a look at is called the MFTE. In plain English, it's the multifamily tax exemption. What it means is that someone coming in to either rehabilitate an older unit or someone who is going to build a new apartment complex of 20 units or more can work out a tax exemption deal with the city of Edmonds if they provide a certain percentage of those units for low income or moderate income folks. They get a tax exemption for about 12 years. The people who are low income or moderate income get lower rents, and it seems to present a possibility of a win-win situation. Let's take a look at that at the slide, which will give us an idea of what's going on here. The Incentives and Requirements Committee is recommending some big changes to the multifamily tax exemption. We want to create a third level of income category eligible people whose income is 60% of the median family income or less. Right now, developers set aside 20% of the new development for lower or moderate income apartments. We'd like to see that go up to 25% to make sure that we're really making housing affordable, which is one of the goals and the missions of our commission here. The construction incentives could be used in this too to help out the developer a little bit. For instance, adding an extra floor if it merits in a certain area, or some additional units if that also fits in with the landscape and the housing in Edmonds. We're not trying to change the city's skyline. We're not trying to do anything that would upset the way we look at Edmonds right now, but rather blend in with the neighborhoods we have and offer some more opportunities to people whose income perhaps is not as high as some of the rest of us. We'd require some 2-bedroom and larger units in these new multifamily tax exemption units simply because they don't exist in the city. Most of the units so far in the one project that has signed on to this are either studio or 1-bedroom units, and that doesn't help families. It doesn't help people who are perhaps elderly who are moving in with their kids. So we're hoping to expand that as well. We'd like to increase the number of areas into which these multifamily units can go. Right now, there's just the one project at Westgate behind the Bartels there. There are 90 units. 20 of those units are designated lower or moderate income units. There are lots of opportunities along Highway 99 with some of the new work that's going in there to add multifamily tax exemptions and thereby lower apartment rents to some of those units. The city hasn't set a deal with them yet, but that's certainly a possibility. This is one tool that will help make Edmonds, we hope, more affordable, increase opportunities for whether it be seniors or families whose income is not as high as it could be or as they would like it to be, the folks who are disabled, even military veterans. This is one tool that we can put in our toolbox to help make Edmonds a better, more affordable, and more welcoming community. This proposal would encourage the city to develop additional community housing partnerships that would really reflect what's going on in all of the south end of the county. Edmonds does not stand alone. It does not sink alone. Everything that's happening in the south end of the county affects our city and has the potential to affect whether people can afford to live in our city. So what we are encouraging the city council to do through this proposal, and let me run through it here very briefly for you. I got the wrong one. Let me start this one all over again.
Okay.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Gotcha. This proposal is about developing community housing partnerships that would include other cities in the area, nonprofit groups perhaps that could work with the city, already existing groups, community land trusts, to open really the South County up to more affordable housing for more people so that we meet the mission goal of making it Edmonds a place to live that is fair and equitable and open to all and welcoming and that they can afford. Some of the things that we've looked at in doing this would be to make partnerships with perhaps the cities surrounding us, Linwood, Briar, Montlake Terrace, possibly even to do it with Shoreline in King County. We could also do it through what is called a community land trust. There's a land trust in Linwood that's called Homes and Hope Community Land Trust. They go out, get a grant for some property, get the funding for it, build low to moderate income housing on that. It's generally only 4, 5, 6 units at a time, but these are standalone properties that they then sell to low income families. And the way they do this is they sell at a lower level than the real estate market is charging. And those people, when they again sell, move up, move out, whatever they do, are allowed to realize a small gain on that property investment, but not the huge gain that we have seen and the giant fluctuation that we have seen with other housing developments. So a community land trust, which already exists, is possible to partner with. The Housing Authority of Snohomish County has through the years developed a number of projects that meet low and medium income needs. There are several of them in Edmonds, and we think the city could look further in that direction to get the Housing Authority of Snohomish County on board. Nonprofits are another way to do this, all designed to expand the housing base that exists in this community to make it more affordable. So community partnerships could be a key element in doing all of that.
Multifamily design standards. Design standards or guidelines can be used by cities to require development to be built in a specific way. These can include engineering and site requirements, as well as standards for aesthetic and architectural appearance. The City of Edmonds has updated some of its standards and guidelines in recent years, but does not currently have guidelines specifically for multifamily zones. This policy would enhance current design standards of new multifamily buildings, especially those with low to middle income housing, to maintain and enhance the unique characteristics of the Edmonds community. Building types would include mixed-use buildings, small multifamily buildings, and larger multifamily buildings. We also felt that there could be some incentives built into the creation of these design standards that would allow possibly for more low-income housing to be built and give flexibility to the developers. That all would have to be considered by other planning groups within the Edmonds community, but there are many options that could be melded in together in these design standards.
Renter's choice security deposit. That's a new wrinkle in something that would affect and benefit not only the city, but renters of all income levels, while still preserving protection for people who own apartment buildings. The bottom line is this: everybody who moves into an apartment pays a security deposit. And usually the agency or the developer is demanding at least 1 month's rent as a security deposit, or 2 months' rent as a security deposit in addition to other fees. And they want that money up front. We're suggesting a different way to do this. Protect the landlord and the developer, but offer the people who want to move into these apartments 3 different opportunities. Number 1, they can buy rental or renter's insurance that would cover a renter's choice for the security deposit. It would protect the landlord and make sure that damage is not done to their unit and that they are recompensed if anything does happen. It also means there's more money in the pocket of somebody who's moving into rent, because generally those insurance fees every month are in the $5 to $10 to $15 a month thing, as opposed to $1,000 or more that they may have in the fees. The other thing we're talking about is installment paying in security deposits. That can be done at least 6 equal monthly payments, which would reduce the amount, the load that would be on the person who's moving in, the renter who's moving in. And the last possibility is to pay a reduced security deposit of no more than 50% of the first month's rent. This would be for apartments in the area here that are 25 units or more. And the idea is, I'm paying less going in, there's more in my pocket, I can spend more in the community, save more for my family. The landlord is protected because they are covered by insurance or the security deposit if there's any damage done. And it really, to us, it seems like a tremendous win-win opportunity to get more folks into an affordable housing element in the city of Edmonds.
Hello again. Happy New Year. My name is Will, and I'm one of the housing commissioners from Zone 7. Today, I want to take this opportunity to talk to you about another permitting housing policy proposal. It's called the Streamline permitting process. A little bit background about these policy proposals. Currently, there are many types of permits for land use development. One type is a conditional use permit, which has additional permit review for certain kind of applications. It also requires a higher fee and a longer process for the applicant compared to other types of land use permits. Now the policy itself reads as follows: reduce the number of conditional use to streamline the permit process. Now, how this policy related to the commission's mission, I'm going to skip the commission's mission statement this time because you probably already heard it many times already. Let's touch on some of the potential problems that this policy proposal can solve for our community. I think the first thing is that if we go with the streamline permitting policy process, it will reduce the long waiting time for people to wait for the conditional use permit. Another advantage to streamline the permitting process is it will reduce the cost for the applicants who apply for this conditional use. And another side benefits that this policy could result is because of the reduce of number of conditional use permit application, it will significantly reduce the manpower that was required to process the conditional use permit applications. As far as for concerns, potential concerns, I can see potentially the city can have reduced fee revenues from those conditional use applications. But from where I stand, I think with the reduced number of manpower that requires to processing those permit, I think the reductions in fee will be recovered from the reductions in labor. So I think it will come out as a win-win for our city. That's all for this process, for this policy process. Thank you and have a good day.
All right. Well, thank you to our commissioners for recording those presentations, and double thank you to Bob for his double presentation earlier. Sorry about that little glitch there. So now we'll be moving into the Q&A portion and interactive activity portion of our event. So first, we're going to go ahead and review the questions that you've provided prior to the event, and then we'll move into the questions that you all are submitting through the mural board and through the Zoom Q&A. Please note that we may not answer every question tonight, but every question that's asked and every comment that we get will be passed along to the Commission for consideration as they make their final recommendations to City Council. So just a quick reminder, if you are using Mural, go ahead and click on the link in the chat, and you can double click on the whiteboard to add sticky notes. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you all can see the Commission, and we'll go ahead and move into answering some questions that we've received prior to the event. Okay, Commissioner Hope, Director Hope, are you here? I see you, there you are. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and I will start asking our questions here. So the first question we received is, what is HASCO?
Well, I can answer that really quickly. And of course, if a commissioner wants to add on, but HASCO is the initials or acronym for the Housing Authority of Snohomish County. So it's a nonprofit agency recognized under state law, Housing Authority. It basically owns some property or can own property and provide lower cost housing for people in need. There are different ways it operates in different cities and different properties. But that's the basic mission.
All right. So the next question is, what is a renter's choice program?
I think Bob Thronson, Commissioner Thronson, could answer that. He just spoke to it.
I just had to unmute there. This is an idea that we came across that actually stems out of the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, where they looked at what they could do to make moving into apartments easier, cheaper, and more practical for lower or middle income tenants. And it basically amounts to three things. Instead of paying your full security deposit up front, which can be 1 to 2 months rent, which can be up to $1,000 or more, they would do one of several things. Number one, you could take out an insurance policy, a renter's choice insurance policy at a rate of anywhere from $5 to $15 to $20 a month that would cover damage to the apartment if you or somebody else did damage to the apartment, and protect the landlord at the same time. So the landlord is protected, their investment is protected, your investment is lower, you have more money in your pocket and can do more things with it. The other is to reduce the size of the security deposit and put it over an equal 6-month payoff. So you would have 6 months of payoff, 6 different payments, which would lessen the impact up front, and again, saving the renter money while making sure that the landlord is getting the money that they need. And the last one would be for a renter or a landlord to accept a security deposit would be 50%, up to 50% of what they had originally placed. Those are 3 options that the city of Cincinnati has used. Other cities are exploring it around the country. And we do know that there are companies throughout the country that are offering this renter's choice security deposit insurance. So it's out there, and it's a possibility that came up during the process of our looking at things.
Thank you, Commissioner Thronston. The next question, would tiny houses / detached accessory dwelling units be available in the Edmonds area?
So to start, I think one of the proposals is to allow what's called detached accessory dwellings. Right now, we do in our city allow attached accessory dwellings that meet certain standards. The thought here is to allow another option, which would be detached. Whether they're considered tiny houses or not is something else, because tiny house tends to be a term that's used in a certain way for really tiny places. And so this would not necessarily be the same as tiny houses, but rather a small cottage type unit. Typically, they're called backyard cottages in some communities, but it's that kind of notion that the commission is considering a draft policy for. Obviously, any decision, of course, would come later through city council process if it is to go further.
Thank you, Director Hope. The next question is, when would the detached ADU policy go into effect?
Well, that leads right off of the question I just answered. So it will depend on whether the council, well, first of all, whether the commission does recommend that policy. They're considering it, but they haven't made up their mind for sure. But if it does continue to be one of the recommended policies, then the city council will be looking at it. And I cannot say how long it would take them to consider actually adopting it. But if they did want to adopt it, it would have to go through a process, a public process that would include, first of all, the council thinking about, well, do they want to pursue that? And if so, they would probably ask the planning board, working with staff, to help develop that idea further. It would require a code change and public process, public hearings, and so on. It could take several months. It certainly could take longer if the council wanted to take longer.
For the resources and partnerships set of recommendations, who would be allowed to rent or buy?
I could take part of that, I think. If somebody else has an idea. This is not public housing. These are privately developed apartment houses and units, just as they're developed right now in the city. So whatever governs who can rent apartments publicly through current landlords or new developments, it is not a form of public housing. It is not up to the city to do the vetting involved there. It's up to the landlord or the developer to do as they do now with apartments that they construct right now.
Thanks, Commissioner Thronston. Does anybody else kind of want to chime in? Okay. The next question is, does MFTE truly make affordable housing options? Bob, you're on fire tonight.
Yeah, I guess so. We looked at the at the multifamily tax exemption that the city inaugurated here a couple of years ago. There's just the one project now at Westgate, as I mentioned. It can be a tool to affordable housing. We think the city needs to go further, and that's what we're recommending to the city council, is that they put a third income layer in there for people who'd make no more than 60% of the average median income. Right now, the levels are 80% or 115%. So that puts you into some pretty high rent brackets. We also, to make it truly effective, I think the city has to mandate that there be some larger apartments in these buildings. Now you're balancing the question of how much money can a developer make versus how much money somebody who's renting can afford. But with some of the changes we're suggesting, we think this could be a better tool, one of many tools, to help make affordable housing more available for more people.
Yeah, this is Jim Oganowski. Just tagging on with what Commissioner Thorson just mentioned. I think within the commission, there's been considerable debate about the MFTE program and how it's benefiting the city versus not. The jury's still somewhat out because we, like you said, there's only one unit within or one complex within the city that currently is using that program. But I would suggest that the council, if this goes forward, would need to really look at the financial implications of it, both for the city as well as for the builder or developer of the project.
Thanks, Commissioner Thronson and Oganowski. The next question is, would applications for housing include background checks?
Again, I think this question is depends on what type of housing you're talking about. The city isn't planning to own any housing, so the city isn't checking backgrounds, but we expect that the landlords of any housing are checking background of potential tenants. So that should continue.
Okay, the next question is, by whose mandate was this proposed, developers or citizens who voted for this change?
I'm not positive of the context, full context of that question, but if it's about where did this commission come from, I think that was, as was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, it came about because there's been a lot of discussion about housing and needs and different ideas. And so the council adopted a resolution and established a housing commission that would be of local residents only from a variety of areas around the city, and asked them to bring recommendations to expand the range of housing options in Edmonds. So that came about as an offshoot of discussion among our community and with the city council.
The next question is, how do these proposals preserve housing for current Edmonds residents who already have affordable options?
Again, it probably depends on any specific issue. Not positive of the context of the question, but none of these tools or recommendations that the Housing Commission so far is considering would take away housing from other people. So it seems like it would be able to preserve the existing housing, and if that's what people choose, and provide some additional options if property owners choose that.
If I can jump in here, and please somebody else jump in with me, but they don't do anything to affect current housing, whether it be affordable housing as it exists now, or single family housing, or whatever housing is there. We're looking for the future to increase some opportunities, but the preservation of the housing that is there continues.
I was also going to say that it gives us an opportunity to plan ahead for development that is going to happen. And it gives us an opportunity, these policies being in place before growth happens means that we can get in front of the growth instead of trying to play catch up.
Thanks, Commissioner Thronson and Commissioner Nelson Vietmeyer. The next question is, how much citizen input has been incorporated into the proposals? I can answer that, I guess. So we've been working with the public through this process for about a year now. I've held a number of public events and kind of public online webinars, knowing that we are living in a global pandemic right now and are not able to meet in person. So we've been posting our updates on our online open house. We also have our public email address, which is always available for public comment. I mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting, and I'll share it again at the end. And then the last piece is all of our commission meetings are live streamed on the city's website and are also available afterwards. So if you're ever looking for information about the Housing Commission, definitely recommend you check out our website. But yes, we have been actively involving the public in this process since the commission began. So Director Hope, do you have anything to add there?
That sounds good. I think each of the commissioners have been taking seriously what they have heard through that process and have modified some of their ideas going forward, and will probably continue that way.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to add, Jasmine, was that we've gotten the feedback at each of the intervals of the public comment and engagement, and have actually modified some of the ideas as a result of that input.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone.
Yeah, Jasmine, I just want to add that within the commission, we also debate different ideas, and this recommendation is as a result of that. And this process is continuing, is not final yet until we come up with a final recommendation, and then the council will also take another further steps with public input. So there will be more opportunities ahead of us.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. And we just got a clarification from the person who asked the question, who said not asking about public input, asking what effect the input had. And I think Commissioner Gladstone just addressed that the commissioners have been receiving the feedback throughout the kind of public engagement process and been modifying and updating their proposals with the public feedback as we've gone along. Okay, the next question is, can you give a better understanding of the federal, state, county, and city policies? What is unique for Edmonds, and maybe compare Edmonds to Mukilteo or another similar city?
Anyone's welcome to jump into that one, but it's such a broad question, it's hard to know because there are 20-some policies currently being considered, and every city is a little bit different in what they have already or what they might be thinking about right now. So Mukilteo, for example, is an interesting city, but it's about half the size of Edmonds. So there'll be some things that are similar and some things that are different. As we go forward and know more about exactly what the commission is going to be recommending, we'll also be providing some more comparisons with other cities or jurisdictions that have some comparable ideas to consider.
Thanks, Director Hope. The next question is there strong support for HASCO and or community land trusts?
I think Commissioner Nelson Vietmeyer might have that one, or perhaps Commissioner Blanche or Commissioner Thronson.
I'll take part of that.
I think Bob said it twice in his recording.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Double your pleasure. No, the community land trust idea is one that is used sparingly at this point in much of the western part of the state, simply because land is not that cheap to get a hold of. But it is nonprofit. I have seen it work in the small city of Twisp in Eastern Washington, where they have 3 different projects going on, and they've managed to do it through a nonprofit organization where they are building homes, smaller homes on smaller pieces of ground, and then turning around and selling them to people who own the property until they decide to move and sell. But they're also keeping the cost lower than the average retail site, the average retail sales for houses. and they are also making sure that people, when they leave, can make a little bit of a profit. There is a community land trust in Linwood. It has developed, if I remember correctly, 3 different properties. We have reached out to them to see if they might be willing to do a partnership if the city council so desires, but that's certainly an opportunity out there. HASCO is another question, and I would imagine Jim has some feelings about that. There are at least 3 projects that HASCO currently owns and operates that are in the city of Edmonds. They're not now entitled to buy any more in the city of Edmonds because these pieces were grandfathered in before Edmonds annexed them, but they do have properties here.
Thank you, Commissioner Thronson.
Yes, yeah, this is Jim. Just to pick up on what Bob just mentioned on HASCO, like he said, HASCO currently owns 3 pieces of property within Edmonds. 2 of them are in the downtown area, and they're subsidized properties, doing a really great job. And then the 3rd one is on Edmonds Way, which is a market rate rental, apartment rental complex. It is at the lower end of the market in terms of rents, but nonetheless it is market rate. And HASCO is like it was mentioned earlier, nonprofit tax exempt organization. I think personally, we can work with them to do a little bit better before we would expand. So there's a lot of discussion amongst us on that topic as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Ogonowski. Moving on to the next question. What is Edmonds' minimum requirement or responsibility under the state GMA, which is the Growth Management Act?
Thanks for clarifying that. So the State Growth Management Act has a lot of requirements and a lot of goals. So there's some things that are explicit and some things that are more intended to be inspirational about how communities take care of their issues, their environment, their public facilities, and their housing and all kinds of topics. But sometimes people have talked about the Growth Management Act in relationship to its expectations about managing growth. So the assumption under the Growth Management Act is that communities generally will have some growth over time, and that's certainly been true in the past. And they need to work out with their county-wide jurisdictions reasonable expectations for that growth and plan for it. And so our city has done that, and we have been able to be pretty much on target with some growth, but not huge amounts of growth.
Thanks, Director Hope. The next question is, where is single-family zoning being rezoned?
Well, at this point, nothing is being rezoned because any zoning action, rezone or zoning action would take place only through city council action. They would, there'd be all kinds of notification. It would be a public process. There would be planning board public hearings, announcements and notifications and all of that. But in fact, none of the proposals say necessarily change the zoning map. There are some proposals that would change the text of the zoning or some definitions. So there could be some changes from zoning or as part of zoning changes, but that would have to get worked out later through the city council and planning board public process. So there's no specific zoning district that is proposed to be changed now. However, there could be some changes if the city council wants to go that way. For example, there's been some discussion about around certain commercial areas, possibly allowing for some greater density in those areas, but those are not specifically named at this point nor decided.
Let's be really upfront with some of these policies that are on the table here. Some of them do, in essence, rezone, if you will, or add density into existing zones. The whole idea of duplexes on every lot within the city. Currently, that is a rezoning of single-family neighborhoods, in essence, underlying or undermining the whole concept of a single-family zoning. So some of the policies do have inherent zoning implications that I think everyone needs to understand and weigh in on. And do we want a dense urban environment or a neighborhood suburban environment? Some of these high-level visionary statements, I don't think we've really gotten our arms around well yet.
I'm going to pass it to Commissioner Gladstone and then Commissioner McMurray.
Yeah, so in one of the early policies that we were considering, there was, I can't remember now what it was called, but there was an actual zone, transition zone or something like that, where it was really specific. And that's one example of where the feedback that we received through the public engagement ended up with us pulling that off the table because of the reaction that it got from the community. So I think that what Director Hope was talking about in terms of potential zoning changes are definitely present there, and would be required probably for some of the policies to be implemented, but it's not that they are directed to do so. The one policy that we did have on the table has been taken off.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Commissioner McMurray?
Thanks. I want to thank everyone for showing up. There's about 46 people fellow residents of Edmonds that showed up, so I really appreciate it. I think we should start answering their questions. I mean, some of the emails came in, those people aren't necessarily here. I think it's slightly rude to just they have to wait for their questions to be answered. I have to say, upzoning, the duplex recommendation is the recommendation of citywide upzoning. There is no difference between a developer coming in and building a townhouse or a duplex. There's such thing as adjacent development that I could come in and buy 3 lots and put multiple townhomes. So just because you say there's going to be 2 doesn't mean there's not going to be multiple. There's a lot of large lots in Edmonds. I think the public should be aware that this is a unanimous decision. There's a lot of, this is a sensitive topic, and I didn't vote for upzoning the entire town. I think we are skirting the issue a little bit, but I think there's some good work here. But I think we need to be more sensitive to the Edmonds community. That's all I got to say. I agree with a lot of the questions that are being posted right now in live time. But I just wanted to convey the message that there's a fair amount of commissioners that aren't in agreement with all these proposals, and they are just proposals. They need to go to the council. So I'd encourage people at this open house to actually email your council people, because they're going to be the majority. You're going to decide on, on if this stuff kind of moves forward. So thanks again for everyone showing up. I really appreciate it.
May I jump in for a second, Jasmine?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing that Commissioner McMurray said, and then I'll pass it over to Commissioner Thronson and then Commissioner Chen. The questions that we're currently asking, one, are showing up both in the live Q&A that's happening now, but were also asked prior to the event. And all of the questions that we're asking now were received by attendees of the event. So these are the questions that folks were asking before the event. So same group of people, different set of questions, but I'm going to be shortening the questions. We'll be wrapping up those questions shortly and moving to the live Q&A. So Commissioner Thronson, Commissioner Chen, and then I am going to move us to the next question.
As you can tell, no doubt, if you're watching us, you'll know that we are not of one mind on everything. We've had robust discussions throughout this thing. We've agreed to disagree on more times than you can possibly imagine. And that's part of the vitality of this commission, is that we've got a lot of people with passion and vision and the desire to help out in this community. I think we have to set the record a little bit straight on something. Mike, you were talking about upzoning the entire town. That is not, nor has it ever been, in any of the proposals we have ever done. And Jim, you were talking about putting a duplex on every lot in town, and I don't believe that's part of the proposals that we're putting forward either.
I'm sorry, but it is, Bob.
Well, okay, I think that's going to be up to the city council to decide if they want to pursue something like that, if it's true. But we are not zoning commissioners here, and we are not telling the folks at home how to zone things. We're offering proposals to the city council to investigate, and then they can take their best judgment and decide whether something does or does not need to be zoned or rezoned. Our mission is not to set zoning standards. Our mission is simply to send proposals to the city council to let them consider what's going on out there. We have a great, robust relationship on this council.
Citywide zoning recommendation is that definition. By definition, if you Google upzoning, that is adding duplexes and quadruplexes to single family zoning. And it's Google, so it can't be wrong.
Move on from the Google nuance. Commissioner Chen, I'll let you have the last word on this, and then we'll move to the next question.
Okay, I just want to add that our commission within ourselves, we like what we just have now. We have heated discussion, and we are very considerate. And during these past few weeks, the citizens reached out to me personally and asking questions. And as a commission, I would urge ourselves to listen to those input and consider those proposals carefully. With this duplex proposal, we need to be extra careful. At the beginning, I was on board with a citywide proposal, and I think we need to step back and look at it carefully.
Thanks, Commissioner Chen. So we've got about 25 minutes left. I'm gonna just preface, we've got a lot of questions here. Let me just go down to the number. Yeah, 68 questions. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we're definitely not going to get through all of these, but we'll try to get through as many as possible. Know that all of the questions and comments that have been asked tonight will be passed along to the Commission for consideration, and we'll also include them in the summary from this meeting. So once we post the materials from this meeting, all of those questions will be available as well. So the next question is, how will we ensure the small town character of Edmonds? And a couple of follow-ups, how will we prevent big developers from taking advantage of such loose zoning guidelines and turning us into Kirkland or Ballard? Commissioner Gladstone, I'll pass it off to you first.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is that what a policy means is sort of providing broad guidelines that then need to have the implementation around it. And that's really where the design requirements and whatever zoning requirements are, that comes into the implementation, where it's really important to define what those are in order to maintain the character. And those can be a range of things, from heights of buildings to amount of square footage on the lot in a similar way that they are today, but keeping in mind what the type of structure that you want there, so that it is compatible with the neighborhood within which it is going. So there's this new type of design standard that's called, or I'm sorry, zoning, that's called form-based, that really focuses on the size of the building and what it can accommodate. But even if you go to that kind of zoning, rather than saying you can only have a certain number of units, it's still really important to be thoughtful about the kinds of design that you allow, because you don't necessarily want to have a box building like a Costco in the middle of a single family residential area, even if it is only 4,000 square feet. So I think that it comes in part in the implementation, and what you're seeing here are the overall policy guidance, and then there's more work that needs to be done before that would be implemented.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Commissioner Hayes-Herrick?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that throughout the discussions of the commission, in the commission hearings and I think within the committee meetings, has been this overarching concern and recognition that the small town neighborhood feel of Edmonds is truly critical. And listening to the issues around the lack of a buildable space, what that means, the cost of land in the city, and yet how do we address the cost and make it possible for more people to live in Edmonds. There are also some things that we have not even been able to start considering, such as what does it take to be a successful homeowner in any given area, even when you have all of the quote roadblocks out of the way. What are those things? What are people looking for when they move into Edmonds? Like Commissioner Chen, I've had many people stop me as I've been out walking, and there are some really important feelings to be addressed as we consider what our final recommendations to council will be. But rest assured, I think the commission overall is listening very closely to that community input.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayes-Herrick. We'll move on to the next question. First is, Edmonds is a unique city and has always been a higher income area. Can we give tax relief to seniors or current lower fixed income families?
Any commissioners can jump in on that, but I think that is an important point that the commission has talked about. And there is some relief right now in our existing codes. And I think the commission is going to be looking at whether they want to recommend any other relief in that vein as part of their next meeting.
Yep. Well, there are programs out there already through the county in terms of property tax reductions or exemptions for seniors and disabled. So those are currently already out there available to the community.
Yeah, can I add to that? Just want to echo that the property tax relief is available even at the county level. I have helped some of my senior clients fill out those forms. So it is available. That is not to say that we cannot propose further reliefs. That's also on the table.
Thank you, Commissioner Ogonowski and Commissioner Chen. The next question is, rather than build our way out of expensive housing, how can we make existing housing more affordable for others?
Well, probably the commission will want to give that some thought because that, they've come up with lots of ideas, but I think that would go on the list of things that they maybe need to discuss before they can make a conclusion tonight with all 15 commissioners.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And there's probably you can come at it from one of two ways: incentivizing the builders to build more affordable housing, incentivizing them with the tax incentives or whatever, or then coming at it from the other way is subsidizing households in need with subsidies or some sort of breaks for the individuals themselves. No easy solutions in any of this, but obviously a couple different ways to come at the same problem.
Desmond, you are mute.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. Yeah, so thank you, Commissioner Ogonowski, for answering that question. So the next question is, how many individual units do you anticipate these changes to add to the city over and above what's allowed in the current zones?
I don't think that's an area that's been fully discussed. It'd certainly be something that's part of the future analysis. For example, if detached accessory dwellings were allowed, the question might be, well, would they be on every single lot? And the answer that we have seen from other communities is no. A few would happen, and exactly how many we would want to go back and look, but it may But it's definitely not going to be, they'll suddenly be numerous units, but there would be some over time that get added on according to what the property owner chooses to do. But we certainly would want to analyze that further. That would be part of any step if this idea goes forward and if the council wants to look at it further.
Jasmine, may I respond as well?
Go for it.
Okay. That's going to depend upon what proposals the city council decides to adopt. I mean, they can take all of our proposals and adopt them. They can take all of them and say, we don't want any of them. They can come up with a mix of things, but it would depend upon what the city council does in its public hearings and where it goes. We can tell you, based on information that we have received through growth management folks, is the expectation for the city of Edmonds in the next, if I'm wrong, Commissioner Director Hope, let me know, but I thought it was in the next 10 to 12 years, they were looking at an additional 5,000 people moving into the city limits or the limits of Edmonds. And that's not something anybody's inviting. It's not because you're building more things. It's just that the increase in population in South Snohomish County is going to go that way over a period of, I think, at least 10 years. They're talking about another 5,000 people who may move into this area.
Thanks, Commissioner Thronson. The next question I'll ask is related to parking. So Edmonds is hoping to encourage additional development in areas with bus service and other transit options. But in order to get to many other places in Edmonds, you may need a car. How is Edmonds going to address additional parking and traffic impacts from more intense development?
Oh, good.
I know this is Commissioner McMurray's expertise, but I think that we do have a policy proposal asking us to make sure that council considers parking considerations. If we get in the weeds, if we figured out, if we were trying to say exactly how that happens, but we do have a proposal out there asking them to make sure that they keep that on their mind.
Commissioner McMurray, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that proposal did not make it to this round of when we did our last vote in December. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was one of the top survey pro things as well, but some things don't get through. I think maybe we can revisit it. I think recommending ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, and not having a parking plan is quite frankly kind of scary. I think the surrounding neighborhoods of, everyone's driven through Linwood lately. There's huge apartment buildings going in. Those people are going to be driving into Edmonds. So for us to recommend density and not take into fact a parking plan, right now our comprehensive city plan does not include much parking. It's basically sidewalks and bike lanes. So I'd like to see parking solutions added to the language of the comprehensive plan. So maybe someday the council can address it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Shane can pipe in about it, revisiting proposals that were shot down.
Yeah, those proposals can certainly be revisited. The other thing is that there was discussion. There's nothing that proposed that there shouldn't be parking with any of the changes so far that people have suggested. Yeah. But there's other things that will have to be considered, certainly when you get into the zoning stage.
When we're talking about ADUs or accessory dwelling units, I thought we mandated in that proposal that there be at least one parking space off street for each new unit that was added like that. So that's an element, and that only handles for ADUs, but it was in that proposal,
Actually, Bob, we took that out.
Yeah. So I'm going to
that requirement out.
We'll have to revisit it then, I guess.
I'm going to pass off to Commissioner.
If I could, Jasmine.
Sorry, Commissioner Gladstone also had her hands up. So I'm going to have Commissioner Gladstone go, and then Commissioner Hayes-Herrick, and then Commissioner Chen.
Thank you. So each of the policy recommendations, I think, have potentially different parking impacts. It's not uniform across the board. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really important that as the council considers the policies that how they implement it through the requirements is really important. Because, for example, your parking implications for detached accessory dwelling units is going to be very different than allowing for fourplexes. And so to make it uniform would be inappropriate at best. And I think that allowing the ability to have specific guidance based on what the type of policy it is enables us to have more flexibility to accomplish what one of the primary missions of the Housing Commission is, to come up with different types of housing. And that parking is an important element of it, that on a policy level, we may not get to that detail, but it absolutely needs to be part of the analysis that council does in their adoption and implementation of whatever policies they do.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Commissioner Hayes-Herrick?
Yes, what I wanted to share with the people who are participating in this is that not only have we talked about the need to have parking and debated that, but there's also been the discussion about the need to get people less reliant on their vehicles. And so what we've tried to do in our discussions is look at ways that's respectful of both, but also keeping in mind, and one of the things that I keep talking about is to be concerned for people with mobility issues, our wounded warriors, and that those groups of people, families who have young children who have to be in wheeled vehicles also by reason of illnesses that they have. We want to be able for those people to participate and to live and enjoy living in the Edmonds community as well. So I do think that this discussion about parking is going to resurface in our next two meetings.
Commissioner Hayes-Herrick. Commissioner Chen, did you want to chime in as well?
Yes, I just want to echo the importance of parking. It is an issue that we cannot just ignore. It requires comprehensive solutions in different areas of town. And with new technology, with Tesla cars, environmentally friendly, but it still requires a parking spot. So it is an issue that will resurface.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. So the next question, I think Commissioner Gladstone wanted to answer. The question is, what are some benefits of medium density zoning versus duplex or 2-unit townhomes? Is that the right question?
I think it's what's the difference between the two. And I wanted to answer that question because it helps to understand what the policy recommendations are. So the duplex policy is focused just on duplexes as an alternative type of housing within single family residential area. The medium density policy allows for not only duplexes, but triplexes, fourplexes, and any other lower development, but only in exclusive areas. And that's really the difference between those two policies.
Thanks, Commissioner Gladstone. The next question I will ask is, will Edmonds ensure that missing middle housing will actually address racial inequity rather than providing additional housing for white residents?
I can take a stab at that first, and somebody else can check in. So, I think one of the things that we talked a lot about is that having policies that help to rectify sort of past inequities can benefit everybody. And one of the things that that I have learned in a lot of trainings that I've gone to on diversity and equity is that leading with race helps to make it better for everybody. And if it can help in one category, then it helps in all. And so while it is not necessarily the remedy that is assured to help rectify the inequities that have occurred in the past. It is a tool that enables households that are not at a lower income. And this kind of links together with that income gap and the wealth gap that exists because of those past inequities. And so it's those two things combined that open up opportunities. And I don't think that there's anything that that we can do or necessarily want to do to ensure that certain people move into certain types of housing, but opening up that opportunity for different types of housing is a way to help facilitate that kind of reconciling for the past inequities.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Commissioner Hayes-Herrick, and then Commissioner Chen.
Yes, I think Commissioner Gladstone has expressed very well what the possibility is of doing it, but I think the question asked, do we have a way to make specific guarantees? And I think that what we really need to be very honest about is that we can come up with policy ideas, we can make changes in zoning, but it is still really difficult to guarantee an outcome. All you can do is change the opportunities. And we've been very sensitive at looking at changing the opportunities.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayes-Herrick. Commissioner Chen?
Yes, I just like to add that this racial inequity is not just in housing. There's a broader solutions that need to be reached. I think the even more important is for our society to provide educations for all people, so that people can have better skills that will earn a higher income. Once you have a higher income, then you can, with the barriers, the redlining that's broken down, then you can get into the housing that people desires without, being considered people of color or white. We should have the opportunities for that. So education, higher income is probably the two root solutions to this.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. And then the last question I'll ask is, what incentives will be offered? So I know that we've talked about the proposals that have incentives. What exactly would those incentives be?
So I think several commissioners have worked on policies that touch on incentives, so open this up for them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that I was trying to remember, there's a couple of articles that I read that provide examples of incentives that other cities have used in order to facilitate development of different kinds of housing. And Vancouver has one, and I'm really sorry, I'm drawing a blank on it, and I'll be happy to provide the article to Director Hope, and she can post it somewhere. That was really innovative, that enabled, that facilitated more of the duplex type housing to occur, and to provide benefit for the neighborhood. So we're not diving into the detail of exactly what these would be, in part because we've asked to do policy recommendations, but eventually, I mean, the council will need to look at what those incentives are. And by the time they would even consider this and approve it, there's so much going on around the country around housing right now, because we're not the only ones that are looking at affordable housing or housing types to accommodate communities. There's a lot of really creative solutions out there that we're not really intending to prescribe any particular approach. And in part because, frankly, there needs to be more staff analysis done that this commission just isn't doing. That's not part of what our charge has been. So there is still work to be done. And I would say our committee, who came up with the proposal around the incentives for middle missing housing, didn't want to specify until more research was done on what those incentives could be. But they are out there because there's a lot of communities that are trying different things. Which ones are right for Edmonds? I think that's something that the council will need to take a look at more closely if they like the policy idea, and staff will need to bring information to the table that does a comparative analysis around what the pros and cons and the benefits and the costs are of those different types of incentives. But they're out there. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
Thank you, Commissioner Gladstone. Director Hope, did you want to chime in as well?
Well, I was just going to say, I think there's another commissioner or two that can talk to that subject.
Okay, I'll leave it open for one more.
Commissioner Johnson?
Well, I could speak to the multifamily tax exemption. Incentives for a builder to do that, to provide that kind of low-income housing units, a percentage of them, is several. They get a tax break for a period of 12 years on the apartments that they have built. They're still paying taxes on any of the businesses that may be there, and they're paying taxes on the land that may be there. But that's one incentive to get them to provide a certain percentage of more affordable housing. Other things that we've talked about, and that's already in existence. That's part of that policy right now. But other things we've talked about in policies may mean that if we have a slightly higher density in certain areas, that the city would still have to decide that perhaps you could go up one more floor if it fit in with the neighborhood. Perhaps there could be some additional units, again, if it fit in with the zoning and the neighborhood. So those are a couple of other incentive type ideas that are out there. And again, these proposals have to go to city council to let them figure out whether those incentives are worth pursuing.
Thanks, Commissioner Thronston. Okay, for the sake of time, I am going to wrap up the Q&A portion and restart our presentation here. So first, we just wanted to thank you all for participating in our webinar this evening. I know that there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. We'll be compiling all of the questions and feedback that was provided tonight with the results from our online open house. So keep an eye out on our website in the coming weeks as we post those results. And the commission will take this feedback into consideration as they make their final recommendations to City Council at the end of the month. So again, thank you so much for participating in our webinar. We have the email address. If you have any additional questions or comments, you can email us at housing.pub.comments@edmondswa.gov. And thank you all again for attending our webinar this evening.